In 1933, two Jewish teenagers from Cleveland, Ohio, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, published a short story in their fanzine. This was titled The Reign of Superman. And it was nothing like the hero we know today. Their first Superman wasn't a savior. He was a bald, telepathic villain, more akin to a sci-fi tyrant than a beacon of hope. But the world around Siegel and Shuster was rough, especially for their families. The death of Jerry Siegel's father, killed during a robbery, left a mark that would reshape their creation. Instead of a power-hungry overlord, Superman became something different. An invincible protector who could fight for justice when real-life justice felt painfully out of reach. Despite his evolution, the character was rejected again and again by newspaper syndicates who simply couldn't see a future in a flying strongman in tights. For years, the boys published their idea everywhere they could, only to be met with closed doors and shrugged shoulders. It wasn't until 1938 when an editor at National Allied Publications needed a last-minute cover for a brand new magazine called Action Comics that Superman finally got his chance. Siegel and Shuster, desperate to break in, sold the complete rights to their creation for $130 and agreed to produce the material. It was one of the biggest creative bargains in history. From that moment forward, Superman wasn't just a comic book character, he was a cultural eruption. And over the past 70 years, there have been eight films featuring Superman. Why? What makes this Boy Scout with red boots and a cape so special that they deserve 8 entire films? Today, we're going to be looking at all the Superman movies to get down to why this guy matters to so many. Welcome to DC December. This year has been a resurgence in DC. After years of clear garbage, we are finally back, with James Gunn taking the reins. And with this year having already seen the release of the real beginning of the now DCU, I feel this is the perfect time to look back at what came before and celebrate it. Not just now, but over the course of this entire month, I will look back at the decades of content we've received and yap about it. Initially, this was supposed to be one really long ranking video that I actually finished editing, but I lost the files. So instead, I'm just gonna farm more content. When a film is only 58 minutes long and still feels padded, you know something has gone very, very wrong in the writing process. And unfortunately, Superman and the Mole Man earns that distinction almost immediately. Intended originally as a pilot for what would become Adventures of Superman, the long-running George Reeves TV series, the film isn't so much a cinematic experience as it is a stretched-out proof of concept. It was shot quickly on a minimal budget, with the kind of straight-line plotting and simplistic staging you'd expect from early television, just without any of the charm or zip that sometimes make that era fun to watch. As the first feature-length DC movie, this is unfortunately an underwhelming debut. It's dramatically inert, conceptually timid, and embarrassingly undercooked. Nothing about the film displays ambition, vision, or even a basic understanding of pacing. It's a showcase not of Superman's power, but of the production team's lack of innovation. The script feels like it was hammered out in an afternoon. The themes of fear and prejudice could have been insightful, this was the early 50s after all, but the execution is so blunt and juvenile that even its most well-meaning intentions come across as condescending. This isn't quaint or dated, it's just bad. And Superman himself, he's stiff to the point of immobility. Instead of using intelligence, strategy, or emotional insight, he acts mostly as a stern lecturer who walks into dangerous situations unbothered, and then scolds everyone into behaving better. There's no depth to his arguments for tolerance, just a stream of simple moral pronouncements delivered with the performative gravity of someone explaining right and wrong to a brick wall. Even his most well-intentioned lines land with a thud, or worst, reveal how poorly the screenplay understood its own message. Which brings us to the film's most unintentionally hilarious moment, Superman telling the Mole Man at the end, "Go back to where you belong." This is supposed to be the triumphant conclusion of an anti-prejudice parable, yet it sounds more like, "Put that thing back where it came from, or so help me." The film means to preach compassion, but ends up sounding like it's endorsing segregation. The contradiction is so loud you can hear it rattling inside the film's cardboard sets. The moral messaging is obvious: don't fear what's different. And it's a perfectly valid message, but the film handles it with all the nuance of a toddler banging a drum. Superman and the Mole Men has its place in history as the earliest Superman feature, but as a movie, it's a shaky, hollow, slipshod effort that feels more like a relic than a foundation. Jumping ahead nearly 3 decades from the stiff, low-budget experiment of Superman and the Mole Men, we arrive at a film that didn't just correct course, it redefined what a superhero movie could be. In an era before CGI, before shared universes, before studios relied on snark and self-awareness to reassure audiences that men in capes were cool, Richard Donner's Superman stands apart for its purity of tone, its earnestness, and its unwavering belief in its hero. This is not a film that winks at its audience or hides behind irony. It doesn't apologize for sincerity, it embraces it. It holds the myth of Superman with both hands and says, without hesitation, yes, this story matters. You can believe in something noble, and we're gonna take that seriously. At the same time, the film never forgets to smile. The tone Donner strikes is nothing short of a masterclass in genre balancing. From the crystalline solemnity of Krypton, to the Americana warmth of Smallville, to the playful energy of Metropolis, every chapter feels distinct yet cohesive. There's a real grandeur here, not just in the effects or John Barry's production design, but in the film's very storytelling architecture. Superman treats its title character as a figure of awe, moral clarity, and most importantly, hope. And it does so with an utter lack of cynicism. In fact, in a modern landscape crowded with self-referential, metatextual superhero films, its sincerity feels almost rebellious. There's something quietly radical about a movie that looks you in the eyes and says, the world needs heroes, and then actually means it. And then there's Christopher Reeve, whose performance is so good, so effortlessly calibrated, that it feels almost supernatural. His dual portrayal of Clark Kent and Superman remains the gold standard for secret identities in superhero cinema. It's not just the physicality, the posture, the gait, the shift in energy, it's the emotional clarity he brings to both halves. Reeve brings depth, heart, and a quiet gravitas that transcends tights and cape. He believes in Superman's moral center with absolute sincerity, and because he believes it, we do too. It's not an exaggeration to say that without Donner's Superman, the modern superhero genre wouldn't exist in its current form. Every major superhero film that followed, from Spider-Man to The Dark Knight to the MCU juggernaut, owes it something. Whether in tone, structure, or thematic ambition, Donner proved that comic book heroes could carry real mythic weight, that they could be cinematic icons rather than disposable Pope. But unlike many films that followed in its wake, Superman never sacrifices heart for spectacle. It doesn't feel manufactured or assembly line, it feels personal, handcrafted, and filled with genuine wonder. More than 4 decades later, Superman remains a film that believes, truly believes in the idea of a hero, not as a marketing tool, not as an IP asset, but as a symbol of hope. In doing so, it invites us to believe as well. It invites us to look up. Superman 2, to its immense credit, is also genuinely fantastic. It may not have the pristine structure, emotional sweep, or mythic grandeur of Donner's original, but it more than earns its reputation as one of the strongest entries in the franchise. And to be clear, I haven't seen the Donner cut. I know it exists. I know many consider it superior, but even judging the theatrical cut on its own terms, this is a very solid film. What impressed me most was the scale of the action. I wasn't expecting a Superman sequel from the 80s to go this big. And yet, the film delivers a large-scale, city-leveling spectacle that still holds up pretty well. Yes, the effects have aged, but they remain charming, creative, and honestly pretty impressive for their time. There's a real sense of imagination at work. superpowered brawls, physics-defying moments, and a playfulness in how the film visualizes Kryptonian powers. The sequel also leans more into humor than the first, for better or for worse. There are tonal inconsistencies, moments when the film suddenly shifts gears, but the comedy rarely undermines the sincerity of the characters or the emotional core of the story. Instead, it gives the movie a slightly lighter personality, a breezier energy that distinguishes it from the operatic tone of the original. Is it as structurally tight or thematically rich as the original? No, but it doesn't need to be. Superman 2 is fun, imaginative, and confident in its own identity, and sometimes that's enough. Superman 3 might just be one of the most tonally confused films I've ever seen. It feels like 3 different movies smashed together: a slapstick Richard Pryor comedy, a surprisingly dark Superman psychological drama, and a corporate sabotage techno-thriller. None of these pieces fit together naturally, and the seams show constantly. The script is scattered, shallow, and frequently baffling. Moments of genuinely good writing buried under long stretches of inane or utterly pointless material. There's no coherent thematic through line. Honestly, there's barely a plot you can take seriously, and yet Christopher Reeve remains the film's saving grace. Even when the screenplay gives him almost nothing to work with, he brings the same sincerity, humor, and grounded charm to both Clark Kent and Superman that anchored the first 2 films. One of the inspired ideas, the Bully Reeves subplot, actually worked for me. It's basically Spider-Man 3 before Spider-Man 3, just a little less embarrassing. The concept of Superman being exposed to synthetic kryptonite and becoming a petty, selfish jerk is honestly fun, and Reeve absolutely sells it. The problem is that the movie around him can't hold it together long enough to make that arc feel meaningful. The whole film is dumb, overstuffed, and often incoherent, and yet there's something weirdly endearing about its madness. It tries so much, fails spectacularly at most of it, and still remains oddly rewatchable. It is, without exaggeration, a god-awful movie, and I love it. So, the next Superman movie, Supergirl! What we have here is a sluggish, strangely lifeless misfire that never figures out what kind of movie it wants to be. From start to finish, the film is sleep-inducing. Badly paced, flatly written, and visually inert, it leans into limp, half-baked fantasy elements while steering completely away from any actual superhero excitement, resulting in a tone that's all over the place and never lands on anything compelling. Even Jerry Goldsmith's score, one of the only genuinely inspired aspects, can't elevate material this flat. His music is practically begging the movie to be magical, but the film just shrugs and trudges forward. This isn't one of those gloriously chaotic, so bad it's good superhero disasters. It's not fun, it's not campy in a memorable way, and it's not even bizarre enough to laugh at. It's simply forgettable, awkward, and deeply boring. A spin-off that feels less like an expansion of the Superman universe and more like a contractual obligation that somehow escaped onto the big screen. Superman 4. This is one of those movies where you just sit back and ask, why was this made? And not even in a snarky way, in a genuine philosophical staring into the middle distance kind of way. Its heart is absolutely in the right place. The message about nuclear disarmament and Superman's responsibility to humanity is noble, earnest, and almost sweet in that child filming their action figures kind of way. But the execution, woof. It's so clumsy, rushed, and undercooked that the whole movie ends up feeling like a made-for-school PSA. Tonally, it's trapped in this weird limbo, too preachy to be fun, too goofy to be serious, and far too cheap to convincingly be either. The whole thing looks like it was shot with whatever loose change they found in the couch cushions. In the end, Superman 4 feels less like the triumphant finale to the iconic franchise and more like a stray TV episode that wandered onto the big screen. Noble message, painfully dull movie. Superman Returns is frankly criminally underrated. This film gets so much right about who Superman fundamentally is. The compassion, the loneliness, the sense of responsibility, the quiet strength. Let's just forget about the creepiness. Brandon Routh absolutely nails the character with a performance full of sincerity, warmth, and emotional clarity. He doesn't imitate Christopher Reeve so much as he channels the spirit of what made that version iconic. The film's reverence for the Donner era doesn't feel like empty nostalgia, it feels purposeful and respectful. It's a slower, more reflective Superman story, and sure, that turned some people off, but honestly, that's what makes it stand out. It's a film far more interested in Superman's inner world than in city-leveling spectacle. It's about longing, about legacy, about what it means to return to a planet that kept spinning without you. There's a melancholy woven through the optimism, giving the film a tone that's genuinely unique in the superhero genre. And Kevin Spacey's performance as Lex Luthor, for what it's worth, is undeniably entertaining. It's campy, theatrical, and strangely menacing all at once, fitting the film's blend of modern spectacle and classic sensibility. Superman Returns is a movie that truly feels like Superman. Hopeful, noble, a little sad, but ultimately full of heart. It's not flawless, but it's thoughtful and soulful in a way it rarely gets credit for. Also, that poster. These next two I'm keeping short because I have a lot more to say about them later in the month. Got you by the balls now, don't I? I get the complaints, truly I do, but unironically, I actually really appreciate Man of Steel. I might be biased because I didn't watch it during the original hype cycle. I first saw it after the new DCU under James Gunn had already begun, so I'm not exactly carrying a decade's worth of frustration about it not being a real Superman movie. Coming into it fresh, it honestly hit me harder than I expected. Yeah, it's dumb sometimes. Yeah, it's loud, messy, and tonally all over the place. But it was also way more heartfelt than the reception led me to believe. Beneath all the rubble and grayscale angst, there's a genuine attempt to explore identity, belonging, and the burden of being different. And that sincerity, however uneven, really worked for me. There's a real warmth in James Gunn's Superman. A warmth that, in the months since its release, has quietly become infectious. This is Superman stripped of cynicism, stripped of grit for grit's sake, and freed from the shadows that modern superhero films sometimes hide behind. There's no darkness, no edge, no ironic wink, just pure, earnest good. And honestly, I think I'm already at the point where I can say that this is my Superman. I don't think it surpasses 78, but it means something to me in a particular way, something that only a handful of comic book movies have managed to capture. When I sat in that theater, I found myself smiling from ear to ear the entire time. That doesn't happen often, not with superhero movies, not with blockbusters, not even with most films I genuinely love, but this one did. It reminded me that hope doesn't have to be naive. Sincerity doesn't have to be corny, and sometimes the most heroic thing a story can do is simply believe in goodness without hesitation. So after moving through all of these films, all these eras, all these reinterpretations, what conclusion can we possibly come to? Why does this character deserve 8 entire movies? 8 chances for different artists to explore the same symbol, the same man, the same ideal. To me, the answer is surprisingly simple. Superman endures because he reflects an ethical truth we're terrified to admit, that goodness in its most uncomplicated form still matters. In a world obsessed with complexity and cynicism, he reminds us that morality doesn't always have to be tangled or tortured. Sometimes it's as straightforward as choosing to be kind. That's what makes him special. Superman embodies an ethic of radical compassion. He makes the world feel a little less cruel simply by believing that people, even at their worst, are simply worth saving. His power isn't just in flight or strength, it's in the moral clarity that says, I will help because I can, even when it's hard. And that clarity is contagious. When the world feels unbearably negative, characters like him push back against the idea that darkness is the only honest way to see things. There's an almost rebellious spirit in that. In an age where negativity is seen as realism and hope is dismissed as naive, Superman's unwavering optimism becomes a kind of ethical counterculture. His goodness isn't weakness, it's defiance, it's resistance. It shows us that refusing to give into bitterness is in itself an act of courage. Seeing him smile, seeing him care, seeing him believe, those moments ripple outward. They make you feel like maybe, just maybe, we're capable of that kind of goodness too. What always struck me about the character is that he confronts the very worst of humanity: violence, cruelty, corruption, and yet he refuses to let those things define his worldview. He doesn't deny that evil exists, he simply refuses to let it extinguish his faith in what people can be. And that's an ethical stance, a deliberate choice to hold on to hope even when every reason suggests you shouldn't. When people say anyone can be a superhero, they're not talking about capes or powers. They're talking about this: the ability to believe in others, to help when it's easier not to be a force for good when the world is pulling you in opposite directions. And that's why Superman matters. Not because he saves the planet, not because he's iconic, not because he's the first superhero. He matters because he reminds us that we don't have to save the world to make the world better. Most of us won't be extraordinary, but that doesn't mean we can't be meaningful. If you can help one person, even once, that's enough to tilt someone's world toward the light. Superman's real gift isn't his power. It's the idea that goodness, genuine goodness, can still inspire people. And that idea, whether on the page or the screen, is worth every one of those 8 films. But that's all I have to say, and as always, maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about. So until next time, keep watching movies, keep noticing the little details, and remember to form your own opinions.